Okay, so we are starting Memhei Amid Aleph. We are, let's see, there's several Tashamas. We're at the Tashama that is about 3, 6, 9, maybe about 15 lines from the bottom, second word. After it says Kamash Malan in the margin, and then the words Tashama. So we're going to start at that Tashama, and we're going to continue. Just quickly, where we are is that the Gemara is making several attempts at understanding the machlokas that we have. First, of course, between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, but also between Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish in interpreting Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So we left off that the latest, there were several. This will be yet another, and then we'll see how it ties together. The Gemara is saying that the machlokish between Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is dependent on a first lashon and a second lashon. In the first lashon, the machlokes is between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as to whether or not gold is considered money or produce. Beis Shammai says it's produce, and Beis Hillel says that it's money, and therefore you can redeem a Maser Sheni into gold, and Rosh Shammai says you can. And then we had a Lishna Achrina that said the machlokes was not on whether gold was money or produce. The machlokes was that the problem is from the pasuk. The pasuk reads that v'nasata ba'kesef v'tzarta ha'kesef b'yacha. This is the Devarim describing how Maser Sheni is brought to Yerushalayim. So because it says v'nasata ha'kesef, that you are allowed to convert Maser Sheni into money one time. So if you convert it one time and bring it up, it's okay, according to Beis Shammai. But if you convert it into money and then you take, like say silver, then you want to take the silver and put it into gold because it's easy to carry gold and silver. Beis Shammai says you can't do a second conversion because it says v'nasata b'kesef. Beis Hillel says you can because it says v'nasata b'kesef, v'tzarta b'kesef. So he uses the second b'kesef to include a conversion of money. And that's the machlokes. So that's where we left off as to the dual interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish, depending on which lashon. In the second lashon, Beis Shammai doesn't even come on to the question of whether gold is money or produce. It doesn't matter. He can hold it's really money, not produce, which means you theoretically could convert, but you can't convert because it's the second conversion, and the Torah says v'nasata b'kesef. You can convert only once. So therein lies the machlokes. Now this Tashema is going to tell us that the Manda Omar, who says that Beis Shammai holds that you can only do one conversion, may not be correct. That he may be agreeing to Beis Hillel that when it says v'nasata b'kesef, v'tzarta b'kesef, it means two. That's what the Tashema is going to discuss with us right now. So now we have that as far as a frame of reference. So let's go right to Tashema. And this is all from the Mishnah in Maser Sheni. Tashema, haporet selo shel Maser Sheni b'Yerushalayim. Now, in the previous version of discussing this Mishnah, there are several Mishnahs in Perek Beis in Maser Sheni. The first one discusses exchanging money not in Yerushalayim, but changing it to bring it to Yerushalayim. And this Mishnah, notice what it says, haporet selo shel Maser Sheni b'Yerushalayim. Okay, you Baruch Hashem made it up to Yerushalayim already. Now you eat your Maser Sheni. Says the Mishnah that since you converted your money into what? Into larger money, let's say silver, now you want to buy food in Yerushalayim to eat. Now, if you remember from last week, we said that a lot of the food is very inexpensive and you can't use silver to buy it. You have to use copper. So now what you have to do is you have to go to a money changer in Yerushalayim and take your silver and exchange it for copper, and you get a lot of copper coins, 700 some copper coins for a seller. So the question now is, how do you make that exchange? A pirate seller bakol hasela mos. You got to take the seller and you got to exchange the whole thing for mos. Mos is another way of saying copper. It's money. Mos is money, but it means copper. So according to Shammai, it's all or nothing. You take your seller and you exchange it for copper. It's Hillel Oimrim, B'shekel kesef, and B'shekel mos. No, Beis Hillel follows his shita when you're making the exchanges outside of Yerushalayim. If you remember last week, we said that when you're making the exchange, don't put all your money into silver because you're going to need money in Yerushalayim to buy food, and silver won't be a coin that you can easily change to buy a loaf of bread or whatever you want to buy. So he says, chatzi, half of it into silver, half of it you keep in sela, in prutos, and then you have no problem. So the same is true in Yerushalayim. Beis Shammai says you got to trade the whole thing. Beis Hillel says the shekel kesef, the shekel mos. Says the Gemara, hashta kaspel gabi prita machalelin. Now, kesef, silver, you can exchange into prutos. It means you can be machalel. You can take off the kedusha of the silver and buy prutos below amrin and kesef rishon below kesef sheni. And we don't make the argument that we made when we discussed last week, kesef rishon, kesef sheni. Oh, you can't do it. You already exchanged once. How can you exchange a second time? We don't say that, even according to Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai allows you to make the exchange in Yerushalayim from kesef to mos, to copper, and he's the one who said that you can't make the exchange only once. And here he's making the exchange a second time. He exchanged it in Chutz Yerushalayim and exchanging it in Yerushalayim. So if you can do it for copper, the kabedava, the choshev minei, then regarding gold, meaning silver and gold, mi amrina, kesef rishon v'lo kesef sheni. Do we say kesef rishon and kesef sheni? Of course not. In other words, the kasha here is according to the Chad Omar, who says that the machloikis between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, as I reviewed it, is in the Lishna Achrina, is by kesef rishon, kesef sheni. The Beis Shammai says only kesef rishon because it says only one time kesef. He doesn't hold that sarta by kesef means change it again. Beis Hillel says it does. So now you have in Beis Shammai, you can only exchange it once. What are you talking about exchange it once? Going up to Yerushalayim, you've already made the exchange outside, and now you're going to exchange it again. And if you can exchange kesef for prutos, then kal v'chomer you can exchange kesef for zohar, because it's more chashuv. So in other words, it's easy enough to say, change it for copper, then kal v'chomer, you should be able to change it for gold. So this is the Gemara's kasha, according to the Man Da'amar, who says that Beis Shammai holds only kesef rishon, kesef sheni. What are you going to do with this Mishnah? The Mishnah says that basically you can make the exchange in Yerushalayim. You've already made an exchange outside, and if you used up your chit for kesef rishon, you're stuck. Teretz is, Beis Shammai says, no, you can make kesef sheni. If you can make kesef sheni, then what's his position in Chutz Yerushalayim? That's the Gemara's kasha on that Chad Omar, who makes that distinction in Beis Shammai between kesef rishon and kesef sheni. You see, beferish from the Mishnah, we have no problem making the exchange in Yerushalayim. So let's take a look at Rashi. Down near the last 15 lines or so. Right, that he exchanges the soloim in his hands for notal prutos, and he gets prutos, copper, because that's what he needs for sudas masa. Beis Shammai amrim im bola hachlev kol soloim shebiyada b'mos yachlev. Beis Shammai is lishitasam that you have to exchange all of it. You can't exchange part of it. Beis Hillel lo yachlev ela chetzion. But Beis Hillel says no. Now here's the reason. Shema lo yisha be'ir ad sheyotze es kulam. Maybe he won't remain in Yerushalayim till he has spent all of his Maser Sheni. He may have to curtail his visit, right? So he'll have money left over, v'yafkid be'ir, and he will leave it in the city. And if he doesn't schlep it back, he'll put it with a friend or in a safe deposit. Ad regel acher. He'll come to the next regel. He'll have money in Yerushalayim and he'll use it. But the problem is v'haprutos misafshos. The copper oxidized. I guess we don't have maybe that problem here, but the copper coins oxidized.
The alloy we use for pennies, which is now mostly not copper, whatever, the alloy we use for pennies doesn't oxidize. But if you look at copper used architecturally, it does. It turns green.
Turns green. So he's afraid that the money, the prutos, that if you buy too many prutos and you don't use them all and you leave them to the next regel, they'll oxidize, right? They'll turn green. The im yachzir. And if he returns, let's say he's smart. He says, oh, no, I'm not leaving copper here. I'm going to take my copper money and I'm going to turn it back into sloim. So when I come to Yerushalayim next time, I will have silver, right? Then the money changer is going to make money on this. And the Maser Sheni is going to lose because the exchange, you're going to have to pay money, and we want to preserve the Maser Sheni for the owner to eat. So it's kind of like you're betwixt and between. You leave it in copper, it's no good. You exchange it into silver, you use Maser Sheni money frivolously. So what do? Says Beis Hillel, not so fast. Don't change it all. Change part of it. Change what you think you're going to use, and then the next time, if you're still in Yerushalayim, change a little bit more. Obviously, I mean, when we go to Yerushalayim, when we go to Eretz Yisrael, did we change our entire money one time? I mean, typically we don't. You exchange money, and if you need more, you go to the money changer and you exchange another couple of bills or whatever it is. I mean, it's money. It's not. It's bills. But that's the prudent thing to do. Is you don't change all your money, because if you leave Eretz Yisrael and you have a ton of shkalim and you go back to where you come from. Shkalim aren't going to do you any good. You turn it back into the local currency where you live and you pay a second time. That's exactly what Rashi says you shouldn't do. I mean, you can do it with your own money, but who cares? But Maser Sheni, you can't take Maser Sheni money and frivolously return it.
Rabbi,
Go ahead.
What happens if somebody is a poor person, but he wants to bring my Shoshani? I mean, he's obligated, but he's going out of his way. He's going to make the pilgrim. Well, he's going to go to Yerushalayim. He doesn't, for him to change, he probably doesn't have enough of copper to get a silver coin out of it. He's scraping up whatever he has. So he can't make the first change to silver. He surely, of course, he can't get the gold. So he's not going to make a change. So he's going to have to carry the little bit he does have to go to Eretz Yisrael. There must be a way that they will accept the copper for the Maser Sheni from somebody like him.
No.
Or does,
Yeah,
I mean, what's the
yeah,
procedure?
It's not that they won't accept. I mean, they'll accept, of course, they'll accept the copper. We're trying to find a way to make it easier for the fellow who's coming to Yerushalayim to accommodate him and make it easy so that he shouldn't have a teretz, I'm not going. When you assemble copper coins, and according to the Gemara that we learned, I think it's, what do we say, 780 something copper coins into a cellar. You know how much that weighs? It weighs a lot. It's a lot. So we encourage you, and there's no one who says you can't. Even Beis Shammai, who is more machmir, said you can make an exchange. According to one mandamar, certainly you can make an exchange. So we're encouraging him to make that exchange so he shouldn't have an excuse not to go up. That's not the point. Your question, I'm going to hold off giving you an answer, because the Gemara is going to ask that question very shortly. What happens if you don't have enough coins to convert it into the next level of money? That's what you're asking.
Yes,
And the Gemara asks that question. So let's hold off on the discussion of what do you do until you get to the next level. But in principle, if you can't make enough Masa Sheni exchange to go to the next level, then we're going to see what Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel say on that. There's a discussion between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. What happens if you can't make that exchange? But again, it doesn't obviate you, it doesn't pater you from Masa Sheni. We're just trying to make your life easy. And we're trying to say that whatever you convert it in a way that it's easy for you to get to Yerushalayim, and you don't have to push a wheelbarrow of copper coins up the hills. As we know, when you get to Yerushalayim, wherever you're coming from, you're going up the hill. So we want to make it easy. Have one coin, a couple coins in your pocket or in your bag. That makes life easy. So that's the ideal. What you're asking, the Gemara is going to ask, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So in any event, so this kasha is a gewaldige kasha, because this kasha actually slugs up the Manda Omar, the Chad Omar, who says that according to Beis Shammai, you can't make two exchanges because of the pasuk in the Torah. We see you can make one exchange you can make outside of Yerushalayim, and one exchange you make inside Yerushalayim. So it puts a crimp in the position of that Manda Omar who says that you can't. So that's the Gemara's kasha. That's the Gemara's kasha. So now, so how are we going to answer it? Says the Gemara, Omar Rava. So Rava wants to give an answer, and he says, Yerushalayim, you're asking a kasha on Yerushalayim? Shani Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is different than any other place. The pasuk tells us very, very clearly in Devarim. What do you do with your money? You go ahead and you buy whatever you like, right? Steak, chicken, fish, whatever you like. So Rava's answer is, it's no raya here that Beis Shammai says you can exchange the second time. Really, you can't exchange a second time.
What daf are you on, Rabbi Grauman?
Say again?
What daf are you on, Rabbi Grauman?
Mem Hey Yomad Aleph.
Thank you, Rabbi Grauman.
Mem Hey Yomad Aleph. So Rava is saying, no, really, you can't bring a kasha on Beis Shammai. He may hold you can only exchange once. What do you do in Yerushalayim? Yerushalayim doesn't count. You can't say, oh, he's exchanging again, because the Torah commands us that you should take your kesef and exchange it. So it's already assumed you made an exchange, and that was okay according to Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel at least once. And now the Torah is telling you make another exchange. So Beis Shammai is off the hook because the Torah is telling you to make an exchange. It's not as if you're making an exchange out of your own will, and it's not appropriate. So since the Torah tells you can make the exchange, no kasha on the Manda Omar who holds that Beis Shammai says you can only make one exchange, because Yerushalayim has its own rules, which we know from many other circumstances that there are times when you can't draw a parallel from one to the other. So that's an excellent teretz, and therefore we're still left with the question. In other words, the Gemara is going to continue to want to question that Manda Omar, but for now we're okay. For now we're okay. All right. So now let's take a look, because the Gemara here is going to try again. And the Gemara is going to ask the same kasha. Okay, so we're going to start Toshima. Now this is the next Toshima. And the Mishnah says, okay, there are three Mishnahs of Masa Sheni that deal with this issue. And this Mishnah says, if someone, now we're going back to outside of Yerushalayim. The previous Torah Shema dealt with Yerushalayim. Now we're going back to our original scenario further up the daf that we learned last week. If someone exchanges a seller from the most Masa Sheni, Beis Shammai omrim b'chol hasela mos, the same machlokes that you have to do all of the exchange at one time. Beis Hillel omrim b'shekel kesef b'shekel mos. So what's the machlokes? That you're in whatever, you're in Tel Aviv or it wasn't in Netanya, wherever you are. You have collected all of this, you've collected the produce, and now you want to buy the silver to go up. If someone exchanges the coins for money, which you're allowed to do one time for Masasheni, so Beis Shammai is Lishitaso. You got to change the whole thing. In other words, you take all of your saloim, all of your prutos, and you make the exchange. And David, we're going to get to the question in a minute. And Beis Hillel says, b'shekel kesef, b'shekel mos. Like we said earlier, you don't exchange it all into silver. You leave some copper over because you're going to Yerushalayim and you need copper. You need the small money. Same problem. Alma, everybody says, hakesef riva, v'afilu kesef sheni. Now, according to this version, everybody, even Beis Shammai, is going to agree that the second v'nosata v'tzarta hakesef allows you to exchange it a second time. So, in other words, now we flip the machlokes, which we said earlier was the actual machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, whether you could flip it a second time. Now the Gemara in this version says, no, everybody agrees that you can flip it a second time. Ella. So then what's the interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish? What's the machlokes? Ella, itma, the Rabbi Yochanan Malakish, hoki itma. This is the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish, who were Amoraim, who are giving their version, their interpretation of the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. What is that? Chad Amar, one says, again, we'll see which is which. One says, machlokes b'shloim al dinrin, that the machlokes is if you exchange sloim to dinrim, which is the original machlokes again. The Beis Hillel says you are allowed to exchange from sloim into dinrim because you consider it money, and according to Beis Shammai, in other words, the Beis Shammai Beis Shammai holds Gosrinan, top of the Mem Hey Beis, Shema, Yisha, Aliosa. So Beis Shammai's concern is that a person is going to delay coming up to Yerushalayim, David, the Zimlin Deloi Molly Zuze Bedinre, because he will not have enough coins to exchange into silver. You need 780 and he's got 560. So what does he do? He's going to take the wheelbarrow and push it to Yerushalayim with 560 copper coins. He doesn't have enough to make the exchange. So what's he going to do? He's going to say, you know what? I'm not going to Yerushalayim right now. I'm going to wait until I have more money to get to the point of making the exchange, right? Below Masik. And then he's going to ultimately wind up not going to Yerushalayim because he will not have enough. So Beis Shammai, remember, previously, what we talked about, the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, where Beis Hillel said you can exchange into gold, and Beis Shammai said you can't exchange into gold. And then we wanted to say, Lishna Achrina, no, it had nothing to do with whether gold is money or produce. It had to do with Kesef Rishon, Kesef Sheni. That was the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shlakish. Now the Gemara in this version is saying, you know what the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Shlakish is? Nothing to do with Kesef Rishon. The Shammai says you can do Kesef Sheni. The problem is, what are you going to do if you don't have enough money to make the exchange? So Beis Shammai is gozer that therefore you have the problem, and therefore you don't, what are you going to do? That's his problem for making the exchange. Beis Hillel Savre, Logos Rina Shema Yisha Aliosa. We're not afraid that he's going to delay going to Yerushalayim, the Chilo Mole, Name Bedinre Asuka Masaklu, because Beis Hillel says if he winds up not having enough silver coins, it's okay. He'll go anyway. So in other words, Beis Hillel has enough faith in the Balabos who's bringing the Maser Sheni that he's going to say, you know what, Sukkot is coming. I have my Maser Sheni. I want to go up there to Yerushalayim and give my Maser Sheni. Now, again, the Gemara is going to talk about it, but he's going under the regel, so he wants to combine Aliyas regel with Maser Sheni. In other words, you got a double header here because he wants two mitzvahs: the mitzvah of Maser Sheni and the mitzvah of Aliyas Yerushalayim. So Beis Hillel says, I don't worry about that. He'll go. Beis Shammai says, I worry about that because this poor guy is going to say, I can't schlep 560 coins up to Yerushalayim. Says Rashi, Shema Yisha Aliyosav, Ad Yaspik, until he has enough, Lioslo Sloim Masa, Ad Shigia, the made dinner Zohov. Bishana Shnia. So he's going to wait until the following year. Sheyim Kamasros Shana Habo. So he's going to combine 2 years into one because in this harvest he didn't get enough. So what's going to happen? Not only will he delay Maser Sheni, he's going to violate Aliyas Regel because you got to go up at least once in the 3 regalim, and if he waits for next year's harvest, a whole cycle will go by. And will have not gone on to Aliyas Regel. So he'll miss Maser Sheni this year, and he'll miss Aliyas Regel because he'll 3 regalim. Remember, you have Maser Sheni, you can do up to 3 Shalosh regalim. So he'll have missed that because the whole cycle will have passed. So he won't do Maser Sheni, he won't do Aliyas Regel, and he's violating 2 mitzvahs midaraisa. So that's the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish is what to do in this particular case.
Rabbi, can you just explain for me? So going back to the beginning, this machlokas is he may not have enough money to go up for one of the regalim to eat his Maser Sheni.
Enough money for Maser Sheni, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that never came up before. I mean, we get to it in the exchange.
No, but this is the new interpretation. Again, we didn't have it before because the Gemara wants to introduce us that you know what the machlokes really is. It's not what you learned before, Kesef Rishon, Kesef Sheni. It's whether or not you have enough money to even go. That's the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish.
But if we go back, I mean, the idea is to take your produce there or to exchange it to eat it there.
Correct.
So the point, I thought the presumption was there was enough produce to be able to exchange for these farmers. Now we're talking about the poor who don't have enough to go, period, which is a different question. But, the whole thing started about exchanging payros for kesef.
Right. So this owner who has a field, he's not a poor guy. He's got a field, and he gives his leket shikhapeya. He does all the mitzvahs that the Torah says, and now he wants to fulfill the mitzvah of Maser Sheni. So in years, in the 3rd year, let's say, of the 7-year cycle, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, he now wants to bring Maser Sheni for himself to eat. He's not a poor guy. He's got
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But since he has such a big field, so he says, you know what? I'm going to harvest what I need to harvest. I'm going to sell it locally. I'm going to be mechalal it. I'm going to make it not kodesh, and the money I'll take to Yerushalayim and buy myself whatever I want in the kind of mitzvah of Maser Sheni. So lo and behold, he does that. And it turns out the economy was such that he's not getting enough money for his produce to have enough money to change copper into silver. If you need 780 prutos to go into a sell-off, and he sells his produce, but the harvest is such that he's got to give away more for less money, and he winds up short of the prutos needed to exchange for silver. He still has a bundle of money, but now what does he do with all these prutos? He can't schlep them up to, in our scenario, he's got too many prutos to schlep up to Yerushalayim, and he's gonna say, wait a minute, I sold all my produce, and every other year I have more than enough money. This year I'm short 20, 100, 200 frutos to get the exchange for the silver. You know what? I'm not going. I'll wait.
But
when is he
there
gonna
had
wait?
to be situations where there were people who pooled their money together that would go up and they could exchange it. I mean, there had to be mechanisms to do that so that even he did not have enough prutos to go up there, that he would combine with somebody else to go up there and they both could go up.
You're 100% right. Probably there was a whole system where people could help each other out. So let's say that was in place, and notwithstanding, again, the Gemara is giving you just an example of one situation. Maybe in most situations, Michael, you're 100% right. I don't have enough. I'll exchange with you. You'll help me out, whatever. But now the Gemara is saying that in the situation where at the end of the day, he was left with prutos that he couldn't exchange. It doesn't matter whether he exchanged his first round of prutos for silver, and now he has extra that he can't exchange. Lamaisa, he's left with prutos, and he can't exchange them into the silver. So we're not going to wonder why. We're just going to say that's the Metzias. He has 500 prutos, he needs 760 or even 80, and he doesn't have enough. What do we do? So Beis Shammai is saying, you know what? That's a problem, because he's not going to want to schlep the prutos, because that's his responsibility. He has prutos, he made his deal, he should go up to Yerushalayim. But since it's so hard for him to schlep the prutos, he's going to say, you know what? I'm going to compromise. I'll skip it and I'll go the next time, because the next time I'll have more than enough to go up. Says Rashi, what he's going to wind up doing is, since the harvest has been completed, he's going to have to wait a full year for the next harvest. 3 regalim will have passed. He will not have gone up to Yerushalayim at all. Sukkot, Shavuos, Pesach, and he'll be over to Isur Lavin from Deraisa, one of Masa Sheni and one of Aliyas Regel, and that we don't want that to happen. So that's the problem. So according to Beis Hillel, it's not a problem, because he says a person isn't going to think that way. A person isn't going to say, "Oh, I don't have enough, I'm not going." But in Beis Shammai's mind, that's going to happen. So the Gemara wants to tell us that's the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish in Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, whether or not they will have the mindset to go up to Yerushalayim, notwithstanding that they haven't converted all of their prutos into silver. That's the machlokes, as opposed to the previous version where the machlokes was kesef rishon, kesef sheni. You're allowed to exchange, you're not allowed to exchange. Here, a brand new machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish. That's the so you're right. That's the reality. But we're worried because Beis Shammai takes the position that he's not going to make the exchange, and that concerns us. Because that concerns us. So that's the machlokes. Again, we want to define it. So let's just So that's the machlokes. 4th line. Avol peiros al dinrin, but exchanging peiros for gold, money, divrei hakol machalin. Even Beis Shammai will agree with Beis Hillel that you can exchange the food for gold. Remember, Beis Hillel and Shammai says you can't, because it is produce, not money. In this version, since the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel has nothing to do with gold, what gold is, the machlokes is, do you have enough money? And what do you do if you don't have enough money? Then according to this version, that man d'Amar will say, you know what, peiros al dinrin, no problem. Beis Shammai says you can do it. Divrei hakol machalin, the kibbutz mekarvei lo masalahu. You hear this? Because since if you don't make the exchange, the food, the Masa Sheni, will rot. So Beis Shammai is being pragmatic, and he's saying, you know why you can exchange it for gold? Because if you don't exchange it for gold, the food will rot. Therefore, you're allowed to exchange it for gold. So in other words, according to this Manda Omar, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are not arguing on whether gold is money or not. Of course, it's money, because Beis Shammai says, I'm afraid it'll rot, therefore I can exchange it for gold. Our machlokes is whether or not you can, what do you do if you don't have enough money, period, enough prutos? But if you have enough prutos, of course you can exchange it for gold and go up to Yerushalayim. We want to make it easy for you. So then, l'chayr, it's a raya here, according to this Manda Amar, that Beis Shammai is not arguing on whether gold is money or produce. He's agreeing that it's money. That's one shita of between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. V'chad Omar, and the other one says, no. Afilu b'peres al dinner nami machlokes, that the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is twofold. It's whether or not you're going to go up to Yerushalayim if you don't have enough prutos to exchange, but the machlokes also is on whether or not you can exchange food for gold, because Beis Shammai hold that gold is produce, and you're not allowed to exchange produce for produce. Beis Hillel says it's money, okay, but according to the Chad Omer, the second Manda Omer, the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is twofold. It's whether or not gold is money, and what are you going to do if you have a shortfall and you can't go up to Yerushalayim? So again, what the Gemara is trying to show us is that in this Tashma, in this version, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, between the Amoraim, in Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is twofold. In the previous version, we said no, that Beis Shammai agreed that it was produce, that it was money for the purpose of making the exchange, except that the whole machlokes was whether or not it was kesef rishon, kesef sheni. That was the previous Tashma. This Tashma says that we're going to ask a kasha on Beis Shammai and that Manda Omar, because what do you say Beis Shammai says? Beis Shammai, according to one version, is only concerned with whether or not you have enough money to make an exchange. If you don't, you won't go up, and the Beis Hillel says you go up anyway. And according to the other Manda Amar, no, it's a twofold machlokes in Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. One, if you have enough money to go up or not, and secondly, whether or not gold is produce or money, and whether you're allowed to do it. So that this Tashma takes a whole different view, Michael, of what we said before, and therefore the machlokes is different. It's a different machlokes, and so that's what we're left with. So now the question is, which version is right? In other words, this version, the previous version, or the earliest version. So the Gemara wants to clarify now which of these three Tashma versions of the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish and Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is correct. I mean, you can say, okay, everybody has a different view, but one of them should be the one that holds water. So that's where we are. So in other words, we have three versions, and now the Gemara is going to go and try to wrap it up for us and tell us which of the three versions of the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish is correct. Okay?
Excuse me, Rabbi,
Yes.
even though I'm sorry for being late, but nowadays, if this happened nowadays, you'd go to Yerushalayim anyway. Nobody's going to stop you to go to Yerushalayim
That's Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says that. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, you go to Yerushalayim, and if you can't exchange it, you're not going to just drive around the streets there, which is too hard to drive much anyway. You would give the money to tzedakah there at the base of English. They had tzedakah pots to put the money in. I mean, that's the fallback position. No matter how the argument goes, you ended up giving tzedakah in Yerushalayim, and you tried your best, and you had this extra that wasn't enough to buy, but it's still giving tzedakah. Haven't you accomplished?
Jay, 100% correct. The question is, again, you want to bring it to modernity. Do you go to Yerushalayim? You pack your bags, you go, and you've got a sack full of coins that's making you overweight on the luggage because you have too many coins because you couldn't make an exchange. Then you're going to say to yourself, what am I going crazy? Of course, if I'm in Yerushalayim, I'll use it, I'll give it to tzedakah, I'll eat, I'll do whatever I have to do. But we haven't gotten to Yerushalayim yet. So today we got on a plane and go. In those days, they had to harness the animal, and sometimes they had money bags. They put the money bags on the donkey, and now the donkey is laboring to go up the hills of Yerushalayim carrying money bags full of coins, it's weighing it down, and the donkey can't move. Again, so you have to put your mindset a couple thousand years ago when it wasn't so easy to get to Yerushalayim. The Torah said, you know what? We're going to make it as easy as we can for you. Take your produce, sell it, get the least amount of coins that you can, gold, or if you need silver, go to Yerushalayim and do your mitzvah and have a wonderful time. But it all starts at the first level with the copper coins. So, and even Beis Hillel, who says, I don't worry about, because people, like you said, will go anyway, he himself says, don't exchange all your coins. Take some of your small coins and go up, which means you're going to have more weight and more coins because you're going to need them. And you're going to need them. And to be most efficient, you should have those copper coins. Beis Shammai says it's an all or nothing proposition. You can't exchange part. You see, the reason why we're in this position with Beis Shammai is because of Beis Shammai's view that I can't only exchange part. If I could exchange part, then Beis Shammai wouldn't have a problem because I would take half my dinrim and I'd get a smaller piece of silver. But since I need it all or nothing, and I don't have enough to get all, I'm stuck with nothing. And therefore, Beis Shammai has this problem. And of course, it's like the Rube Goldberg. You tip one, and then all of a sudden everything tips. You can't go, which means I'm not going to go, and I'm going to be over the lav of Maser Sheni and over the lav of Elias Regel, all because I couldn't make an all or nothing exchange. Does that sound rational? That doesn't sound rational at all. But that's Beis Shammai is always the machmer. We know that in the machlokes Beis Shammai still, except in a few exceptions, Beis Shammai is machmer. Can you imagine if you followed Beis Shammai, what position you're in then, and you're looking at your family and saying, I can't even go to Yerushalayim. I don't have the wherewithal. I can't saddle my donkey with 560 pieces of copper. I'll never get there. So again, put your mindset not into today, but into the time of the Gemara, when every little thing here becomes a big deal. Beis Hillel says, no big deal. They'll go anyway. We'll exchange part of it. We'll make it do. We'll make it happen. Right? Sometimes you say to yourself, I don't care. I'm making it happen. I'm going to Eretz Yisrael. You overcome all the hardships. But Beis Shammai puts all these hardships in front of you. Yeah, Menashe.
Okay, so I got probably a little Googling here. And according to one site, but I'm sure there are variances. Different historians have different things. But talking about in ancient Egypt, roughly a 100-to-1 ratio in value of copper to silver, and using that as a rough guideline, and looking at estimates for what the size of the ancient shekel was, and considering at a minimum there was half shekel coins. We know that because the Masis a shekel. Rough calculations to get from copper to a functional silver coin, let's say a Masis shekel, we're talking at most 2 pounds of copper. So yeah, there could be issues if it's less than that and so on. I could certainly see the problem of, I just don't have enough from my Maser Sheni this year to afford an entire trip to Yerushalayim, so I want to save up for that reason. But in terms of the weight, yes, it's a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's not like you're going to have 50 pounds of copper coins. Once you get to even a few pounds of copper coins, you should be able to convert to silver.
Right. So Rashi previously, when he gave the nominations, to find the Rashi says that I think there was two shekalim in a selah, I believe, and 780 frutos. Was it in a half a shekel or maybe in a full shekel? Okay, so if it was in a full shekel, then again, I don't know what the copper weighed. You're saying it weighed 2 pounds. I mean, enough for the Gemara to say he's not traveling with the copper. It's too heavy. Is 2 pounds too heavy? Probably not. But it sounds to me like, based on what the Gemara is saying and Rashi's interpreting, that having only prutos and not being able to exchange all of the prutos into the let's say the lowest common denominator of silver was enough to thwart him from going. That's Beis Shammai's position. Again, the weights, I can't, it sounds, again, he didn't say how much it weighed. Rashi didn't say how much it weighed. He just said how many prutos you needed to do it. The prutos may be very light. You're right. What is a copper coin? It's probably not that heavy. But once you start assembling all these copper coins, it seems like Beis Shammai says it's a terrible inconvenience for the owner of Masasheni, and he won't go. He just won't go. He's going to wait until he has enough, and that can cause him to not go. That seems to be the outcome of this situation, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Whereas according to Beis Hillel, it's never going to be a problem because, first of all, he says you don't have to do all or nothing. You can exchange only part of it. So if he exchanged part of it, he has already lessened his burden by half, whatever. And if he has extra copper coins, Vishkaferla, says the Gemara, he'll find a way. But Beis Shammai, who again is the harder position to justify or rectify, he's saying it won't happen. He won't do it. So, notwithstanding the relative weights, we're just going by what the Gemara says. Maybe it's not weight; it's volume. Again, he's saying that it's too much to carry. That he just won't do it. He just won't walk with a barrel full or bags and bags of copper coins. That's not what he's going to do, and therefore he will not be oila rega. So again, that's the machlokes. Okay, that's the machlokes, says the Gemara, and that's what Rashi echoes. So
A technical point, Rabbi.
Yeah, David.
Ola regel is a positive commandment, isn't it?
Say it again.
Ola regel is a positive commandment, not a negative.
Yeah, but
negative attached to
No.
it.
You'll be over the mitzvah say.
Yeah.
Again, Masashen is also a positive commandment.
Right.
So it's not a lav. I'm sorry, President. It's not a lav, but violating a mitzvah say is also not something to take lightly. I mean, if you have a mitzvah say and you thwart it and you avoid it, then the Torah doesn't say nice things about you. You've taken here. I've given you a mitzvah say, an opportunity of being Mekayim, and you flaunt it. No, that's okay. I don't need it.
But in the case of Maser Sheni, there is a lav attached to it if you don't do it by a certain amount of time, right?
Three regalim.
Yeah. So and the other thing is that there were periods of inflation, and the Amoraim were probably familiar with the periods of inflation where there would have been a lot more coins involved.
Right. I mean, again, you're right with all these nuances as far as what it is that you should or shouldn't do. But again, we're dealing in a society at a time, you can't put ourselves in that position where we have all of these it's so much easier today to do these mitzvahs and to get around the problems. Back in those days, everything was a chore, saddling up and schlepping to Yerushalayim. It's as wonderful as it is to go to Yerushalayim. I'm sure, there were enthusiasts who said, "Oh, I'm going to Ola Regel." I can't, there were those who say, "Oh, I'm going to Ola Regel." It's a hard life, especially in an agrarian society. It must have been very difficult. So the enthusiasm of going to Yerushalayim is dampened to a degree because of the circumstances that you didn't have enough to make it easy, and again, on the flip side, Beis Shammai has to, according to this one man Amar, he has to deal with the fact that if I don't do it, what's going to happen to my produce? It's going to rot. So he's worried about rotting, and then on the one hand, and then he sells it so he can go to Yerushalayim, and now he has the problem of getting to Yerushalayim. In any event, this is the machlokes. So now we're at a point where the Gemara is asking, so what's right? What's correct? What's not? So let's go a little bit weiter, and we're going to see how the Gemara resolves this. Okay, so now we're in like the 6th or 7th line. But here was a okay, everything is perfectly fine according to the Lashon, the Amrs, the Midaraisa, Mashra Shari, V'Rabbanan who de Gazre. Everything is perfectly fine if you interpret. Remember that this whole mitzvah this whole mitzvah of Masa Sheni, of everything else, there's a deraisa and there's a derabana. Okay, so on midaraisa, there is no machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel whether or not you can take the produce and exchange it into dinrim. No machlokes midaraisa. Beis Shammai agrees you can exchange it. V'Rabbanan hu de gozrei, and the midrabanan, they were gozer. In Beis Shammai, that Beis Shammai says you can't convert it into dinrim because dinrim isn't money, it's produce, and you're not allowed to exchange produce for produce. Says the Gemara, if you follow that pattern, then the Mishnah makes sense. Because the Mishnah, now let me read you the Mishnah. This is what we get to the Mishnah Masa Sheni. The Mishnah says as follows. Beis Shammai Omrim, it's Mishnah Zayin in Perek Beis of Masa Sheni. Lo yasa odam eslov din rezov. Says the Mishnah, Beis Shammai says you are not allowed to make. Yasa means to make. You're not allowed to, a person is not allowed to make his sloim into dinrim. Beis Hillel matirin. Okay, so let's just look at the commentary to the Mishnah. I happen to have a kahati in front of me, so I'm going to read you the kahati and listen carefully. Beis Shammai meliyas slum din rezot. Mishi yesh lo sloi kesef shel masa sheni. If a person has silver coins of masa sheni, lo yachlifim bedin rezov, he should not exchange them for gold. Kidei sheyeh kal lo lavin Yerushalayim. So make it easy for him to be Yerushalayim. He shouldn't do it. In other words, don't make it easy for yourself because of the problem that we said that although midaraisa you're allowed, midrabanan you're not. Beis Hillel matirin, Beis Hillel says yes. Lahachlif sloi kesef shemasa sheni b'din rezov. You can exchange silver for gold. Okay. Now, tam machlekesam. The reason for the machlekes is before the Bava Metzia on our daf now Memhem Beis. What we're learning, Beis Shammai choshishim. Beis Shammai is concerned Shema Yisha Es Aliyoso Yerushalayim, that maybe he will delay his Aliyah Yerushalayim at Shiloh Sloim Maser Sheni B'Shava Shel Din Rezov, that he'll wait until he has enough silver, not copper here, silver. To exchange to gold, he'll be mizvatl elias regel. Beis Hillel sovim she'en choshishim lekach. Beis Hillel says we're not afraid. But in any event, the words of the Mishnah are lo yasa odam es salov. A person should not make. Now, why is this important? Take a look. So because he may not make. So what's pshat he may not make? That means that according to this version, what's the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? The Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is, are you allowed to do it? We know that midaraisa you're allowed, but are you allowed to do it midarabana? Says the Gemara Vayta. According to the version that says that the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is not midrabana, it's midoraisa. Why is it midoraisa? Because Beis Shammai says that midoraisa you can't even exchange it into gold because gold is not coin, it is peiros, it's produce. Then the Mishnah should not have said lo yaser adam. It should have said lo mechalim adam. A person can't be mechalel. He can't make whole his sloim for dinrei zohar. Using a different word. So the Gemara is interpreting that since the Mishnah uses the word yaser, it inherently means that the machlokes between Beis Shammai's Hale is midrabanan, not midoraisa. Because if it was midoraisa, they would have used a stronger word, and it would have said lo yechalel odam eslav. A person cannot be machalel. He can't make chol. He can't make it unholy. His din rezov and Beis Hillel matirin. Beis Hillel says you can. Why? Because the machlokes, according to this version, would be whether or not din rezov are money or not. According to Beis Hillel, it's money. You can do it. Midoraisa, and according to Beis Shammai, you can't do it midoraisa because it's not money. So if you're arguing that everybody says midoraisa, it's okay, it's only the rabbinical decree that we're worried about, okay, that I can live with. But if you're going to, and that's proof positive from our Mishnah, that that's what it's talking about. Because if it was talking about the more serious case of the machlokes being whether midoraisa you can do this, then the Mishnah would have used different versions. Therefore, answers the Gemara kasha. That makes it difficult to understand what is the correct version, because what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with the underlying machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as to whether or not it's money, and meaning gold is money, therefore you can exchange, or are we dealing with the fact that no, everybody says that it is money. Even Beis Shammai agrees it's only midrabanan that we have the problem, because, and then we can pick your choice, either because kesef rishon, kesef sheni, that's a rabbinical issue, not midoraisa. Going up to Yerushalayim on time or not, that's midrabanan, not midoraisa. So we're left with the question that it seems from our Gemara, from the Mishnah Masa Sheni, the Mishnah intentionally said lo yase adam and not lo yechalel adam, that we're extrapolating that this whole discussion is not a midoraisa dika machlokes, because Beis Shammai midoraisa says you may exchange it for gold. The whole machlokes is a rabbinical, rabbanan is gzeira, whether or not you are allowed to, and then pick your choice, whether or not you're not a kesef rishon, kesef sheni or not. Says the Gemara, kasha, now I'm left with a kasha, which is the correct version, because you can pick, if you're telling me the whole machlokes is midoraisa, perfect. Then I know what the machlokes is, and Beis Shammai says you can't go up with din rezov, and Beis Hillel says you can. But since we're saying that midoraisa, it's not a machlokes. Why? Because the Mishnah, the rabbis of the Mishnah told us it's not a doraisa issue by choosing the words lo yasa odom. That means Beis Shammai is saying, no, gold is okay. But my problem isn't the gold. My problem is he's not going to go up for one of the other rabbinical gezeras. And that already poses the problem, which of those rabbinical gezeras, and that's why the Gemara says kasha, now I'm left with the question, which one? The Gemara thought, oh, it would be an easy answer because we're going to go right to the heart of it. We're going to say, you know what? The machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel has to do with whether gold is produce or whether gold is money. And then yes, no, no. It's not
Rabbi,
so simple.
The argument doesn't make sense to me.
Go ahead.
I'll explain why.
Yeah.
So the Raisa, it's allowed. Everybody agrees it's allowed.
Under this
So-
circumstance, yes.
So why, and I want to go
Stop
back.
a minute, Michael. What does that mean, midoraisa, it's allowed? It means that Beis Shammai says you can exchange into gold coins because gold coins is money.
So that's what I'm saying. So is the issue that they don't want it to be converted a second time?
That's one position.
Because the fact is, yasa means you made it. You didn't make anything. You might have converted it, but you didn't make that into something. You converted. So the word yasa does not strike me as that you made it into something, because you're not transforming it. You're giving it to a changer. You're selling your produce and converting it into a change. So now they're going back to, now this interpretation goes back to the fact that gold is not money, but we already heard a version of Beis Shammai that gold is kesa.
It's
So
kesef. But look at the lashon of the Mishnah is lo yasa adam. A person may not make slav, his silver, into dinrei zahav. Not because you can't, because zahav is bad. It's because of kesef rishon, kesef sheni.
but I thought there was a specific wording that said that everyone agreed that there could be kesef sheni to go up to Yerushalayim.
But that's only according to one manda omar.
So it still doesn't go back to the point that you can convert once in the beginning where you break it down into three. You break it into Zahav, Kesef, and Dinarim, because you need it for all three things. You convert it once. It seems like the whole machlokus is about the second conversion.
Correct.
So why doesn't that solve the problem?
No, the problem that we're left with is originally we thought, oh, you know what? The machlokus Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is whether or not you can exchange into gold coins, whether gold coins is produce or money. That was a very clean machlokus. Beis Hillel says you can. Beis Shammai says you cannot because it's not money, it's produce. We said that can't be the actual machlokus because of the language of the Mishnah of lo yaseh instead of lo mechalel. So since we've established that midoraisa, everybody agrees you can exchange silver into gold, the whole question is, what do you do with kesef rishon, kesef sheni, or exchanging prutos into silver, etc., etc. We have three versions in the Gemara, and the Gemara concludes which version is correct. If we would have said that the machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is only about whether or not gold is produce or not, then we have a clear-cut machlokes, and we all go home because we know that that's the machlokes.
Right.
But we're saying that that's not the machlokes. Beis Shammai is agreeing that it is money, but the machlokes is which of the three versions now that we've just said from last week to this week is the correct machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara Kasha, I don't know. I have a problem because I don't know which version is correct.
So what were the Chachamim trying to do to change the Doraisa to make it more difficult to get to Yerushalayim?
The Amoraim of the Gemara, who are going back and forth and trying to understand which of the versions of the Gemara is correct, are saying that from everything we've learned to date, we're stuck. We don't know if the real machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is about kesef rishon, kesef sheni, whether it's about exchanging dinrim into, prutos into dinrim. We just don't know, because the language of the Gemara, of the Mishnah, tells us that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are not arguing about changing into gold coins. Everybody says you can do it. The question is, can you get there? And if you can't get there, why? Because Beis Shammai says that you can exchange from prutos to silver, but not silver to gold. Or Beis Shammai says that you have to exchange all or nothing. Or Beis Shammai says that you may run short of enough prutos to exchange it into silver. That's where the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is, and we don't know which version is correct. So the Gemara says we're arguing over which version is correct, and kasha, it's shver, because we don't know. There's nothing from the Mishnah which says lo yasa adam that gives us any clue. So Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish, who are the Amoraim trying to interpret Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, according to which version you want, they're saying it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. So we're left, this sugya now is over, and we're left with an uncertainty. What's the real machlokes between Rosh Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan? Everybody agrees that Beis Shammai says that gold is money. So midoraisa, you don't have a problem. Change it into gold, and go gesundheit to Yerushalayim. But the Rabbanan put a gezerah on this exchange and said, wait a minute, it's not so simple. You can make one exchange. But I have to make more than one exchange. Sorry, the Shammai says, no, you can't. The Hillel says you can. I don't have enough to take up to Yerushalayim. What am I gonna do? The Hillel says, no problem, go anyway. The Shammai says, I'm not going. So these clairs, these different views, Michael, we're saying we don't know which is the correct interpretation of the machlokes between Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. We don't know.
So Rabbi, what's the halacha? Are we going to get to it?
The halacha is that we hold like Beis Hillel, that you are allowed to make more than one exchange, that you don't have to have an all or nothing situation, that you're allowed to go to Yerushalayim, that you will go and you're allowed to go to Yerushalayim with less than a full exchange, and you can exchange it to gold. That's the halacha. But
So what's the Mishnah wording trying to say in that the lo yasa in the Mishnah? What's it mean? If that's the case, what does it mean?
So it means that midoraisa we don't have a machlokes. That's what it means. It means that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are not arguing midoraisa. When Beis Shammai says lo yasa adam, it's midrabanan, and Beis Hillel says matirin, it's midrabanan. That's what we've gotten. And
So
by
do we
the
go
way,
back to
that's a huge
Doraisa?
thing.
Are we effectively saying we're going back to Doraisa by ruling in accordance with Beis Hillel, that we're going
No,
back to
No,
Doraisa?
we're saying we came to a very important conclusion that midoraisa we have no problem, and that's
Right.
really a major step forward of this.
But we've
whole
got three different opinions, the Rabbanon, and we don't know which one's right, and the halacha goes back to Doraisa. So
No, but that's exactly what the Gemara says. The Gemara says kasha. I'm left with a quandary, which of the rabbinic gezeras plays here, but I have no quandary about Doraisa because Beis Shammai says you can exchange it.
and so de facto we've said we can't decide, so it's teku on that, and you go back to Doraisa.
No, so again, midoraisa, you're okay because Beis Shammai agrees you're okay. But remember, we live in a society where the Torah tells us that the rabbis have the right to create gezeras, and you have to live by those gezeras. You can't say I'm a derisa guy, and since the Torah allows it, I'm not worried. By the way, there are Yidden like that who say, "Min Torah, I can do it. I don't care what the rabbis
I
say."
understand that, but effectively, from what we're concluding, we don't know which of the Rabbanans to
Correct.
follow.
Correct.
So effectively, we're going back. Beis Hillel is saying you can do anything. So effectively, we're going back to Doraisa because we don't know which the Rabbanan is right.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
So that is reverting. I'm not saying we don't do it ever, but in this case, we're not following any of the shitas of any of the arguments.
That's why the Shulchan Aruch had to come later and say, you know what? When those Amoraim were questioning which is the right rabbinic gezerah, this is the halacha. I'm telling you what the halacha is. The halacha is like Beis Hillel, that everything is makel, that you can bring gold, you can bring half silver, half gold, in other words, you have no restrictions,
I agree.
As long as you get to Yerushalayim on time, you're good.
And de facto, that goes back to Doraisa, and it says the Rabbanan's, any version of the Rabbanan's decree is not valid.
That's correct.
So that's why I said, I'm not saying
that,
we never followed the Rabbanan,
Michael,
but effectively.
We have the benefit of the halacha to look back on. At the time of the Amoraim, there was no Shulchan Aruch.
So what did they follow at that time? What was
so the Gemara says kasha. In other words, they left it as a question mark, and it could be that this one held this way, this one held that. But there was
to use a modern analogy, when you have a question and it's not clear in the Mishnah Berurah and so on, you say, ask your local Orthodox rabbi.
But that's exactly right. So if you lived in Pumbedisa, you did one way. If you lived in Shushan or wherever it was, you did something else. But you make a good point. At a time where you don't have a uniform decision, then the Rabbanan, the siyog by the Rabbanan is different in different places. And by the way, that's why you see minhagim like this and minhagim like that, is because midoraisa, everybody says, of course you can do it. But where is the siyag? Now, it just so happens here that since midaraisa you can do it, and the halacha, which we know later from the Shulchan Aruch, codifies like Beis Hillel, then we know he's lenient on all of these questions. So we know what the halacha is, but we do, they didn't. Because
But
of
see,
the-
Rabbi, the detriment here
We're
is that
not
this is a
saying-
mitzvah assay that people had to do. You should encourage it anyway
Right,
for people to come to Yerushalayim.
right. But
With
yet,
their
for some
master
reason,
So to thwart it, because I have to, my opinion governs and you can't do this, is blocking you from performing the mitzvah. There should be some recognition that it's not what I think, but what is in the best interest of
Michael,
You know,
I
the
couldn't agree
Kahal.
with you, but now go convince Beis Shammai of that.
no, I understand, but that's
Beishamai-
why
Let me
it's an
give,
easy
give an
answer.
analogy. But I have an analogy.
Beis Shammai were machmirim. And you see today, and I don't want to draw too many parallels, but you see today, you have certain opinions of more right wing, and I'm saying extreme right wing poskim, who basically, you're in a straitjacket. There are things you can't do because, oh, this is a problem, this is a problem. And I go back to Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe said, don't make problems where there are no problems.
Exactly.
Where the halacha says it, follow the halacha. So then you have the Beis Shammais of the modern world, and I don't want to cast a spirit of Beis Shammai, but you understand what I mean. Beis Shammai was a machmir, which is why the Torah says we paskin like Beis Hillel, because we don't live in a Beis Shammai world. Maybe
we
when
also-
Mashiach comes, we'll live in a Beis Shammai world. We don't today.
But we also don't use this as an example that says when there's a machlokas modern, we go back to Deraisa. We have to still include all of these different views that flow down, even though they didn't come to a closure.
Right.
Can't automatically use this example that Michael's talking about to say, okay, in the future, when there's machlokas, I'll go back.
No, I'm not saying that.
No, but Jay, that's why hundreds of years later, Rabbi Yosef Karo, when he was Masada, the Shulchan Aruch, took all of these views that we're talking about in the Gemara and sat down with his colleagues, and they thrashed it through, and they said, you know what, this is the halacha. Now we said that the Shulchan Aruch is with Ruach HaKodesh, but he did exactly what we're talking about. He took all the differing views and said, this is the halacha. So there's no longer an ambiguity which gezerah, Michael, we're going to follow. Forget about it. This is an academic discussion that we're having. It's not a halachic discussion. The halacha, which we have the benefit, not they didn't have that benefit. We have the benefit of hundreds of years of halacha, and we say, you know what? That version is correct. And we know Beis Hillel's version is correct in all of these situations that we're posing the machlokes rabbinic decrees.
So it's worth
look-
going, I don't want to steal Menashe's thunder, but I want to
That's
make
all
one
right.
last point.
Okay.
So I agree we need to go through all this discussion, but once you decide that you don't know which version it is and the question still stands, then you should say, look, there were other interpretations, but this is the halacha, which is what the Shulchan Aruch did, but I don't understand what people did in between when you had this different.
So if you
know,
followed, if you were a follower of the machlokes between Yechon and Rosh Lakish about Kesef Rishon, Kesef Sheni, and that
Right.
was your then you would say,
Hug, right?
you know what? Midaraisa, of course, no problem. I can do this, but I'm not comfortable with making a double exchange because Beis Shammai said you can't make a double exchange. If you were a Shammai devotee, then you wouldn't follow the Deraisa. You'd follow Beis Shammai.
And I understand that, but if the answer, as Beis Shammai says, people won't go up to Yerushalayim, then you're defeating the greater good for standing on what is your principle.
Right. And therein lies the fault in Beis Shammai's view that he makes it so egregious for someone to go up to Yerushalayim because it's all or nothing, and he's got to exchange all his coins. And if he doesn't exchange all his coins, then he's saddled with hundreds and hundreds of prutas, which make it difficult for him to go. Beis Shammai is throwing obstacle after obstacle after obstacle for going up to Yerushalayim. I agree with you 100%, but that was so all the Beis Shammai Hasidim said, yeah, you're right. You got to be, the perfect storm has to occur for you to go up to Yerushalayim. midrabanan, not midaraisa. But you're right in asking that question and saying, why would they do it? Why throw up all those roadblocks to make it difficult to go to Yerushalayim? But that's the inherent question on Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, why are you doing this? Why are you being so strict and making it so difficult to go up to Yerushalayim? Beis Hillel says it's not strict, and we paskin like Beis Hillel. In retrospect, if we knew the halacha at that time, we would have said, no. Beis Hillel is right in all of these circumstances, and there's no question here that you can exchange half and not the whole, and that whatever you exchange is good enough, and then you go up. You don't need all of these roadblocks. So your question really is on Beis Shammai. Why would Beis Shammai make it so hard? And again, and our Gemara, by the way, when it says kasha, it's not the question of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, it's which version of the machlokes d'Rabbanan are we saying is correct? We'd like to have closure, and the Gemara says we don't have closure. We know midaraisa everything is okay, but midrabanan there are differing views of which Rabbanan is the gezerah, and we have to be left with a question because we don't know. But if you're asking me the halacha, no problem. The halacha is that we pass it like Beis Hillel, that even though Shammai agrees that gold is okay for money, it's okay for money. So midaraisa, you're 100% okay. But we pass it like Beis Hillel that all of the other roadblocks that Beis Shammai put into place as to why you wouldn't go to Yerushalayim, no roadblocks at all. Any way you get to Yerushalayim, by hook, by crook, by whatever, is okay. Exchange a little bit, exchange a lot, exchange it 3 times, 2 times, whatever. In other words, Beis Hillel doesn't have all those restrictions. So we can go around and around, but I think we understand that the closure to this Gemara is that midaraisa it's okay. Midrabanan, we have differing views and we don't know which view is correct. So we leave it there. And the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So therefore, which gezerah of the Rabbanan is immaterial, because at the end of the day, you wind up going to Yerushalayim with whatever you've got. So it's not material to know. I mean, we'd like to know, but we can't find a clear path to understand academically what the machlokes between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel is on the gezerah midrabanan. And therefore, since we pass on like Beis Hillel, those gezerahs don't exist for all intents and purposes. Therefore, we're free and clear. And everybody goes into hey, you go to Yerushalayim. Today, of course, we have no such issue. I mean, there's no Beis HaMikdash, so it's kind of a moot point. But in Yerushalayim itself, those who want to, I guess, Masa Sheni does apply. So I mean, people are still coming from Tel Aviv or wherever on Oil Regalim. Maybe not as many people, but people are doing it and eating their first fruit and their Masa Sheni and all the other good things in Yerushalayim. And the Mekayim, the mitzvahs Hatluya Ba'aretz. Those have never gone away. The mitzvah Hatluya Ba'aretz, Masa Sheni, Bikurim, all the things we talk about still apply today, even without a Beis HaMikdash. So we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but I mean, people want to go and they want to come to Yerushalayim and do all those things.
So it's still time to go buy a ticket.
Say again?
Bottom line, it's time to buy a ticket.
It's time to buy a ticket and go. I'll show you the one.
All right. So one, and I'll make this quick because it's very late. But one analogy that came to mind, it's quite a bit different actually, because it's Hanukkah. It's different for one thing because we start off the entire everything is midrabanan. But just thinking about it, thinking of it this way, you could have a family with several people and going, 1 candle first night and 2, 3, 4, and so on up to the 8th night. By the time you're done, you've used hundreds of candles, and yet in reality, the halacha, the bare halacha, and you're totally full of mitzvah, is 1 candle for the entire house for each night, 8 candles, and you're done, no matter how big the family is. And so you don't want to, on the one hand, it's wonderful to do all these other things. And it similarly would be wonderful to say, okay, we're going to restrict ourselves and really concentrate on this mitzvah and only make 1 exchange or be very careful how we deal with the gold and so on and so forth in order to really concentrate on this mitzvah and make it the best possible thing. But At its basis, you could do anything as long as you get to Yerushalayim. And at its basis on Hanukkah, you're short on candles. Don't say I'm going to skip a night because I'm short on candles. No, light one candle, be done. Don't say, oh, I don't have enough for everybody.
Right.
Light one, be done. Fulfill the basic mitzvah because that's more important than all the rest.
Right, so don't get caught up in the fact that you can't light for every single one for every night. Make sure you light one to minimally kind the mitzvah. Very good point. So let me just clue you in that mitzvah next week, we're going to pick up here, and the subject is going to be, wait a minute, you said in the beginning that, how do we start this parak? That Hazov Koine is a kesef, that produce is what determines ownership. And if produce exchange hands, then even if the money hasn't exchanged hands, the deal is done, except that you have to wait for the money to exchange, right? We all remember to go back to the original because we've been talking about a whole different subject. The next Gemara is going to challenge that very point and say, are you sure that it's produce that makes the bilus? Wait a minute. No, money can do the same thing. So now we're going to go into discussion on the very basic premise of whether or not it's produce that exchanges hands that makes the kinyan and the money is an afterthought, to where the Gemara is going to want to try to show us that money can do the same thing. Exchange of money and not exchange of produce makes the kinyan, which is completely opposite to what we've been thinking all along. That's now the next Gemara. If you think we've been confused enough, now the Gemara is going to try to get and tell us, no, you don't need produce to exchange hands. You can even have money exchange hands, and it works. Now we're going to see again what the Gemara says on that. But again, this is why, you learn something basic. We've now concluded a sugya, and we're going to go to another sugya, and we're going to try to upend the very basic halacha or the very basic discussion that we started the whole parak with, which is that again, we've been thinking all along, produce. The produce has to exchange hands in order for there to be a kinyan. And the Gemara wants to tell us, not so fast, money can do the same thing. All right, I'm giving you a preview.
Yeshkoach.